Hi everyone, welcome to Toolkit's webinar, Common TRI Reporting Mistakes, a deep dive. Today we'll just go over common mistakes made during TRI reporting and little ways that we can make this a bit easier for you. I'm going to be the presenter today. My name is Gab Orman. I'm a registered environmental engineer with the state of Arizona and the Director of Compliance Technologies here at Toolkit. So what is Toolkit? Toolkit is a customizable active compliance management software suite, and we also do engage in traditional consulting. We ultimately designed the software to make day-to-day EHS compliance active and efficient and make your lives easier as EHS professionals. The most relevant tool that we offer to today's discussion is going to be our TRI Toolkit. TRI Toolkit is a guided end-to-end EPA TRI reporting and submittal tool where you just enter in your usage data, tells you what chemicals you are over the threshold for, and ultimately puts together and submits your Form R for you. He uses built-in logic and IVAI to reduce time, errors, and risk associated with TRI reporting. Hence, we're pretty passionate about making TRI reporting easier for everyone. Other tools that we offer do include a compliance tool, which assigns, tracks, verifies, and documents compliance activities. It is basically our environmental management system tool. We also have our determination tool, which helps you do our standard applicability determinations, much like you would see in a typical EHS department where you're trying to figure out what regulations are applicable to you. Our determination tool helps you do that. We have an emissions tool, which centralizes your emissions data, does calculations and reporting support as well. Our parsing tool, where you can upload your permits and plans, and it extracts all of those requirements and turns them into actionable tasks for your team to do. And like I said, we do engage in traditional support aligned both with our Toolkit platform and also general EHS compliance services. Today, we're going to talk about what causes mistakes in TRI reporting. We'll go through products and avoiding missing any information. We'll talk about exemptions and how to avoid misinterpreting any exemptions. And then we'll close on talking about release profiles and avoiding miscalculations. So, what is the root of many of the mistakes associated with TRI reporting? Common root cause of reporting mistakes. One of the many that I see is just a general lack of resources. So maybe your department is understaffed, maybe you have different priorities, or there might be even just a lack of training associated with the types of calculations and equations that you may need to work with during TRI reporting. Another common reporting mistake I see is using some sort of legacy calculation method or legacy assumptions, and those may have hidden errors that you're unaware of, but have carried over year to year in your reporting. And then finally, a lack of proper planning or running out of time. TRI reporting is very comprehensive, and so it is common for you to want to get through all of the other reporting that happens in the front part of the year, like Tier 2 or your emissions reporting, and then you go to start TRI reporting and realize that there is a lot more there than you maybe had time for, and that type of rushing while reporting does lead to missing information. So let's talk about products and starting strong in the reporting to avoid these errors. Gathering up your information both accurately and thoroughly is going to be really important for TRI reporting. So getting your product and chemical identification One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is waiting too long to start this process, and then you run out of time trying to collect all of your product information and all of your waste characterization information. So always try to start your inventorying sooner than you think. Your tier two reports may actually help you with a good solid starting point for your TRI reporting because there is likely going to be overlap between the chemicals, but it's always good to start inventorying your products at the beginning of the year, throughout the year, so that you don't have to do this last minute scramble. Otherwise, you will miss products and you will be trying to track down SDSs, and that just adds to the general stress levels during TRI reporting season. The second common mistake here is leaving out any incidental byproducts that may come from your process. So say that you are processing a chemical and you are incidentally producing hydrochloric acid. Whether that is on purpose or on accident, you need to track and make sure that you are reporting that hydrochloric acid production as well. Part of knowing that you need to report this is having a very well documented process. So, having a process flow, identifying all of the ins and all of the outs of the system will do you a great service during TRI reporting season. Now, the next ones are a little more in the weeds. One common mistake I do see is not knowing that a product has a TRI chemical in it or assuming it meets de minimis levels and it doesn't. This is pretty common with carcinogenic chemicals where the de minimis is 0.1%. So making sure that you have an accurate way to parse through your SDS tracker and get all of that information from it. TRI Toolkit, which I'll show you a demo at the end of this presentation, but TRI Toolkit does have a sort of inventory system that highlights where TRI chemicals are present in your processes. For manual data entry errors, so you have a stack of SDSs and maybe you're 8 hours into your day of transferring information from SDS into your TRI calculations, you really want to make sure that you're scheduling in some data QA QC time to just confirm that your data entry was accurate. It's really easy to accidentally add a decimal point at the wrong spot or add a zero, and that can have a big impact on your thresholds. And the final mistake I see being made often is improper thresholds and improper threshold assessment. And so you really want to have a clear way to indicate which thresholds are exceeded in your chemical tracking system and which need to be reported on versus which ones you are maybe below the threshold of. This can be really hard to keep track of in like an Excel spreadsheet. So be sure that you are doing the way that is best for you in your facility. Now to talk about relying on legacy information and the errors that that can result in. For TRI reporting, the most common way of getting this data together is in a really big stagnant Excel spreadsheet. So legacy spreadsheets can get you into trouble pretty quickly. The biggest mistake I see is that say that you are a new hire in your EHS department and you're handed the company's TRI spreadsheet. The biggest mistake people make at that stage is assuming that whoever made the spreadsheet got it all right in the first place. Just because the spreadsheet's been used year after year does not mean that it is correct. So always check your numbers, check your calculations, and confirm that the spreadsheet is even accurate in the first place. Often you might be missing processes, it might be referencing the wrong column or the wrong cell because you added in a new product over time. And so it's really easy to break these spreadsheets and not realize that they're no longer accurately calculating your releases. The second mistake here is treating that Excel spreadsheet as a stagnant black box and not frequently updating it, making sure that you have some sort of schedule and routine where you are actually going in there, updating the spreadsheet, making sure that it is accurate and up to date and calculating everything correctly, can save you a lot of error down the road. Ultimately, if we want to talk about minimizing risk when doing big calculation heavy reporting like this, moving towards a new software program or a better way of tracking these calculations is going to save you money over time and save you time as well. Another thing that I see people relying on is any exemption assumptions that you might have had from previous managers, previous decision makers at your company. It is very common to assume that the exemptions that were relevant last year are still going to be relevant to this year and the year after. That is not always the case. You might have changed something in your process, you might have changed products in that process. And so you want to do at least a quick reassessment of your exemptions each year, just to confirm that your processes haven't changed. And if they have changed, you still meet those exemption definitions. Another common mistake I see is people trying to claim the article exemption, but there are releases over zero point 0.5 pounds per year. So often people will assume that they can get away with the article exemption because they're just cutting steel or cutting down steel rods to size. But if you are using a plasma torching table, you could be releasing over zero point 0.5 pounds per year. So having that really well documented is going to be um, uh, in your favor for trying to prove that this exemption is valid. Similarly, PBTs are not allowed under the de minimis exemption, so they actually do not have a de minimis threshold. It is very common for people to apply that 1% or 0.1% to PBTs and try to exclude them from their TRI thresholds, and that is not a valid exemption usage. And then often I will see people trying to use the special use exemption being applied to more than allowed. So for example, like you might have a cleaning product that you use for janitorial services that has acetone in it, and you can exclude that specific product as being used for that specific purpose, but that doesn't mean that you can exclude acetone entirely from your facility. So always make sure to document your exemption review process, document that these are the reasons for those exemptions, and review your exemptions every year for any changes that may have occurred. That way you can be assured that this is a repeatable and defensible exemption usage in your reporting. Now, errors that are made while calculating release profiles, these can be really varied. The meat and potatoes of a TRI report are these release calculations, and it can get pretty complicated and pretty in the weeds. And so make sure that you're dedicating some time to doing this for each of your chemicals. Commonly, we're just going to go through each of the types of releases and what those common mistakes are and how to minimize it. So first off, fugitive and stack air, which are lines 5.1 and 5.2, our air emissions. What are some common mistakes here? Number one I see is forgetting to include any potential unintentional releases. Things like if you are painting or you're using aerosol cans and solvents, those are going to off-gas some amount of the VOCs that are contained in them, and making sure that you include those even if you're not intentionally releasing it. There are other unintentional releases, especially of like if you're transferring monomers from one tank to another, you're going to have some unintentional releases during those transfers. The other common mistakes I see is picking the wrong emission factor. There are a lot of options for an emission factor, and so you want to make sure that it matches your process as closely as possible and make sure that you're using EPA confirmed methods, such as AP42 or other approved emission methods. And lastly, the biggest common mistake I see is unit conversions. So often air emissions, we're looking at millions of standard cubic feet of air per some time frame, and then you're trying to convert that into pounds. And it can be really easy to mess up your conversions. And this is also going to play into that legacy spreadsheet issue where maybe you've assumed that your spreadsheet is converting everything correctly. However, not always the case, and it's really easy to mess up unit conversions when it comes to air emission reporting. My last tip for air emissions is going to be to utilize any emission reporting you may already do for like a Title V or a non-Title V air permit. Those emissions that you're reporting on and tracking for your air permit are likely the same types of releases that TRI reporting is going to want to hear about. So you've already done those calculations. Take advantage of that overlap. For water releases, line 5.3, 5.4, and 6.1, we are looking at stormwater, injection wells, and POTW transfers. So the biggest thing that I see is underestimating stormwater as a release pathway. If there are any processing areas that are exposed to the sky and exposed to stormwater runoff, including dumpsters that may contain waste that has a TRI chemical in it, you are going to have some reportable level of that TRI chemical in your stormwater runoff. The TRI guidance does have good estimated ways of estimating what this looks like, whether you have any TSS data from your stormwater runoff or whether you want to estimate it using solubility data for that TRI chemical. Both are valid pathways, but it is a release pathway that you need to consider if stormwater can run on to your processing areas. The biggest one I see for dry wells and injection wells is forgetting to address any spills that may have occurred. So if you spilled something in your processing areas or outside during loading or offloading of trucks and that entered a dry well, you will want to be reporting any TRI chemicals that were involved in that spill to your TRI reporting form. And then similarly, not addressing POTW transfers properly. So if you do have a wastewater system and you are transferring industrial wastewater to the POTW, you likely have a monitoring plan that you are taking frequent samples and assessing your wastewater for certain toxic chemicals. Using that data will save you a lot of headache when trying to figure out your TRI reporting. Those are releases ultimately to water. You're just going to the POTW first. So minimizing the risk here, I would recommend storing your wastewater data in a way that's easy to manipulate. It can be really annoying if you are only keeping the lab reports and then you have to then go through a year's worth of data while doing your TRI reporting to make it manipulatable and into Excel. So just have a system that works for you in storing that wastewater data. You want to confirm your mass balance calculations closely while doing this, since it is all ultimately based on pounds and not volume. You want to make sure that you have all of your densities and all of your mass balance set up. And then confirm your stormwater flows. If you are in an area that gets a lot of stormwater, could be potentially a pretty large release pathway for you. In terms of land releases, lines 5.5 and 6.2, on-site and off-site land releases, these are usually pretty straightforward. However, I do see commonly people will not include spills. So say you spilled something on land and it only contacted land, you do need to report that release on your TRI form. So any documentation you may have regarding that spill, make sure that you kept it, make sure that it is logged in your system and you are prepared to pull out that TRI chemical. Evaporation ponds, no matter what they're a part of, if there's a TRI chemical being directed to that evaporation pond, make sure that you have documentation about what percentage of it is going to that evaporation pond, because that is considered a material placed on the land. And then ultimately, the last common mistake I see is people will use some sort of waste product, maybe like their slag or their overburden, and they will use that to reinforce and enhance their roads on site, which is again allowed compliance wise. However, if that slag and overburden does have a percentage of a TRI chemical involved in it, that is technically a new release to land that needs to be reported. So minimizing risk here, I would highly recommend collecting any documentation that's related to you and your facility placing materials onto the land and then determining if there is a TRI chemical within that and having an easy way to speciate it out. There are also offsite transfers, so of course, keeping your manifest, keeping your shipping papers, that will all help you in determining what got sent offsite for disposal as well. Now, I mentioned not leaving enough time to do your TRI reporting being a big issue for folks. So TRI is time consuming. EPA themselves estimates that it takes about 35 hours for the first chemical you want to report on, and then they estimate that it takes about half of that, so about 17 hours per subsequent chemical. So if you have 5 chemicals that you need to report on, that's going to be 35 plus 17 plus 17 plus 17 plus 17 hours. That's a lot. So whoever's doing your TRI reporting, they have a good chunk of their time dedicated to collecting all this information. EPA's estimate assumes that you have this information readily available. So this does not include any extra time that you may spend gathering up information to know which chemicals need reporting on, and it does not necessarily include any QA/QC for the data itself. So just be prepared, make sure that you're accounting for the time that this will take, and prioritizing that within the other needs your EHS department needs to take care of. Toolkit is time saving. So TRI Toolkit, one of our biggest things is that our users do estimate significant time savings while increasing the overall accuracy of their reporting. The experts here at Toolkit are the ones putting together your release profiles, so that takes a load off of you and your team. And once your system is set up in that first year, you just have to plug in your operation data. Toolkit can help. We have never taken in a client's existing TRI system and not found an error in it. So we are 100% on finding errors and increasing the accuracy of our clients and users' TRI reporting. It provides you direct access to experts. We help you consolidate the information. And once you are set up in the system, year after year, it auto-populates and you just need to go fill in your new usage information. To close out our webinar today, I do want to just give us a quick demo. This is our TRI Toolkit website, and on it we have this webinar, which I'm going to mute and I'll talk over it. So this is the front page. When you go in, it shows you some tracking. You can compare facilities. You can look year over year. We have a quick entry. You can either manually upload or upload your products with an SDS. The SDS, our AI IV support bot, automatically parses out the information for you. and then it looks at your threshold. So once you add in your activity information, it will collect all of that, do the math for you, and ultimately show you the thresholds. And then we configure your release profiles and you just enter in your information. And it does all of this tracking for you. At the end, it populates it into your Form Rs, which you can then download and upload into your CDX profile with the EPA. That's just a quick look at what TRI Toolkit is capable of doing. If you are interested, feel free to reach out. Upcoming webinars. We plan to do these webinars pretty frequently, at least once a month. Our next one is tentatively slated for March 18th, and we will talk about using TRI Toolkit and the data from TRI Toolkit to inform sustainable decision making. Ultimately, we are uploading all of the recordings of these webinars on envirotoolkit.com, which is our main toolkit website. Thank you for your time today. That is all I have for you. If you have any questions or you wish to reach out to learn more, this is my contact information on the screen, and I look forward to having those conversations. Thank you.